News Channel 8 photojournalist Courtney Kinzer. News Channel 8 is Iowa's news leader.
Hello, hi, how are you? And welcome to another podcast by George. Well, we're meeting with another talented friend of mine. We've got Courtney Kinzer in the house today. He's the chief photographer, lead photographer. What's that title, Courtney?
Director of photography.
Director of photography at KCCI Television. And he's getting to be a bit of a graybeard. He doesn't look it. He looks like he's about 30, 40 years old, but this guy has been around. He's got those bona fides that I like to talk about on the show. He's been shooting television news since the mid-'70s. And here's the way that I want to start the show, and it gives me an opportunity to talk about somebody else, too. There's a construction company here in town that a lot of folks might be familiar with if they're from the Midwest, even from around the country. McAninch Construction. It was started by Dwayne McAninch. His father had a bulldozer and got him started in the business, and his brother, George McAninch, was a Picasso with a bulldozer. This guy was absolutely the best, and one of the reasons was, he had a talent, he had a skill for it, but he was there from the beginning, basically, when cable dozers turned hydraulic and when the machinery got sophisticated. And in this part of the country, that guy is responsible for the earth below your feet everywhere from the Des Moines International Airport to the Merle Hay Mall to Sec Taylor Stadium. You just can't imagine how much this guy is responsible for. And he was the best. My dad was in the business also. And he didn't have much good to say about anybody, but he would always talk about George McAninch, and he said, "Son, watch him." And he really was. He was a maestro on a machine, and that's the way that I think of Courtney Kinzer, and his career is, sometimes they call him photojournalist too, Courtney, a videographer, and I don't know. I tell people that they ask me who you are, I would say that you're a shooter.
Well, again, George, thank you very much for inviting me. It's very humbling. I always say I shoot glorified home movies. That's what I do. But the pretentious term is photojournalist, news photographer. Photog is what we call them here in the newsroom. We say, "Hey, who's your photog?" So that's kind of where we go with it.
Are you familiar with a movie called Lonesome Dove, the miniseries?
I don't think so, no.
All right. There's a scene at the end of that movie where these two old Texas Rangers, Tommy Lee Jones plays one of the characters, and a newspaper man comes up to him, and they've been through this saga, and that's the nature of the miniseries, actually. And the newspaper man says to him, he says, "We hear that you're a man of vision. Can you tell us about it?" And so then Tommy Lee Jones and his character flashes back to the visions of his life, and most of it isn't very good. For a guy that's in your business, a lot of people would think, "Oh, my God, the bad news that this guy has experienced, that he's seen, that he's witnessed firsthand, it is what he's always going to think of and remember, that's the nature of his business." Is it?
No, it really isn't. I consider myself extremely lucky to have, I'm going on 44 years career here. I started in 1975. I call this job the ultimate backstage pass to life.
Yeah?
Every day is a new adventure. And it's just so many amazing people I've met and experiences. And it's just, I can't think of a better job to just, again, experience life. I've got a lot of, I try to think of the good stories that I've done over the years. And the people I've met, it's just amazing.
Well, background us a little bit, because I first became aware of you. It's hard to believe, really, honest to God. I don't remember much about the 70s, for one thing. But, that's when I first became aware of your work, starting out in this business. What was that like? What was the business like back in the late 70s, mid-70s?
Well, it was newsrooms were a little different, a little freer, a little looser. But it was, for me being a high school kid coming into a TV newsroom with, you can imagine, the mid-'70s and the people that I was working with were, the older veterans plus the people that just got out of college. It was a very loose newsroom. But
how did you do that? How did you get into a newsroom? How did you get to work when you were in high school?
Well, here's the crazy story. So my dad worked for the Associated Press. And we watched the CBS Evening News every night with Walter Cronkite. And at the time, I had a home movie camera, and I thought, and this was in junior high, I wanted to be a Hollywood movie cameraman. So that was my vision. I remember watching the movie Patton with George C. Scott.
Sure,
And I said,
yeah.
oh my gosh, that would be so much fun to be a cinematographer making movies like that. But and I had a home movie camera. I was making home movies, your typical home movies that you do with your friends. Well, the more that I watched the CBS Evening News with my dad, we were watching a lot of the Watergate coverage. And I'm watching all of the network camera crews chasing people out of the courthouses in Washington, D.C. This is a true story.
Well, they're still doing it. I think I saw it on TV today.
Yes, they're still doing it. And I'm watching it at home with my dad. I'm thinking, wow, that looks kind of interesting and fun, I'll be honest. And so with my dad's approval, I started going to news events with my home movie camera on my own. I used to go to news conferences. My first, quote-unquote, first press pass, my dad pulled some strings, and this was 1974. I covered Gerald Ford's visit to Iowa in 1974, and I had an actual press pass. I still have that press pass with my home movie camera. I was with all the network camera crews, and that was the moment that I was like, I remember being on the tarmac in Air Force One lands, and I saw the network pool camera crew run out of the back of Air Force One. Those days, the cameraman and the sound man were connected together, and they're banging and clanging and running to the front of the plane, and I have this on home movie, and I'm like, oh my God, I've never seen anything so cool in my life. And that was the moment where I said, this is what I want to do for my life.
That's extraordinary. I mean, you go back to the Gerald Ford presidency, doing this work. I just can't overstate how significant this is for people in this part of the world. So much of what they've seen, quote unquote, or what they've experienced has been through a camera lens that you've operated. That's
well, and so I started. I started my journey by going to press conferences again with my home movie regular 8mm home movie camera, and I'm sure people are looking at me like, "Why are you here?" I remember going to a Governor Ronald Reagan press conference, a Ted Kennedy press conference, a Daniel Ellsberg press conference, an MTA bus dedication with my home movie camera. And I was focused also shooting the camera crews. I was like, oh my God, there's a 16mm camera. I'm taking pictures of that. Well, then it goes to, I'm a junior at Roosevelt High School, and there's a career day. And I'm going to have to throw out my credit to George Davidson, who at the time was working for KRNT Radio.
Yeah, I remember him. Yeah.
And he used to be with WHO TV.
Yeah.
So we had a career day at Roosevelt High School, and he was doing the broadcasting end of it. And after the class, his presentation, I came up to him and said, I want to be a TV news cameraman. He gave me his business card, and on the back of it, he wrote the name of Lyle Shires.
He's got the card in his wallet,
I've got
folks.
the card in my wallet.
He's digging this out.
And this is my good luck charm. And he said, Lyle Shires, the chief photographer of Channel 13, is the best cameraman I know, and why don't you give him a call? And to this day,
there it is.
I carry his business card, and on the back of it is Lyle Shires.
Yeah, and Lyle Shires, for people that don't know or aren't, he's the Yoda. Of television photojournalism. He taught me a class at Drake University. And so when did you first encounter Lyle then?
So this was April of 75, and I called Lyle that afternoon as I came home from school after talking to George Davidson. And I carry that George's business card in my wallet as my good luck charm. And I have ever since that day. I called Lyle, and he said, well, you know what? We've got a opening in the film lab. And at that time, all the TV stations shot 16mm color film. That was the technology of the day.
Yeah, and the wind-up Bell and Howell, right?
Yes,
Yep.
exactly. Good memory. He said, why don't you come down for an interview? And my weird little story, my parents lived on Zwart Road in Des Moines. My parents never owned a car, ever. Grew up in Des Moines, never owned a car. So I took my home movie projector in my Boy Scout backpack, and I walked downtown from my interview, and I showed Lyle my news movies. And kind of like
From
my
the home
demo
movie camera.
from my home movie
Yeah,
camera.
yeah.
And this is my demo reel. And he watched them and he critiqued it. He said, "Okay, that was good, but no, that was a jump cut. That wasn't so good." And he critiqued my little montage of all these news conferences and the Gerald Ford visit. And for whatever reason, that night he hired me to work in the film lab of WHO TV.
Yeah.
5 days a week, and I became obsessed. I would come down there on my days off. That was my obsession. And Lyle, I'm forever grateful, taught me how to shoot and edit TV news film. And back in those days, we edited the film with we spliced the shots together with glue.
Yeah, razor blade, and scratch off that emulsion.
Yes, exactly.
He tried to teach me, and I was not a very good student in a lot of different ways, but he was really big, and I hear that from what you're saying. Tell a story. He wanted to look at what you shot, and it should have a beginning and
yes,
and an
beginning,
end.
middle, and an end.
Yeah, and I was not very good at that. I could get little pieces of it, and then scratching off that emulsion and using that little splice block and putting the pieces together. And then was it glue or tape?
We used glue.
Okay.
We used glue, and there was a hot splicer. Well, there's still things that Lyle taught me though that still resonate in my mind to this day. One of Lyle's quotes: "Courtney, faces tell the story. Shoot faces besides your wide, medium, and close-up." And the one bit of advice I've always remembered to this day, he said, "Courtney, eating is not pretty. Do not shoot people eating because that is not." And I still tell people that, it's like, avoid that if you can. And so he guided me through my early career in high school, and I went to Iowa State University, majored in broadcast journalism, and still worked at WHO on the weekends. And that just set my career path. Thank you, Lyle.
So he was the mentor. I mean,
he was my original.
A kind man. He just was a nice person.
Yeah.
I could see how he could teach you very well. You're in the film lab at this point? Are you shooting at this point?
He started me in the film lab that May of '75, and by that summer, within a couple months, he started to let me shoot 60mm news film. And I can still remember, the very first news film, they let me shoot weather film, which was a little thing. It's like, well, it was a nice day today. And I remember the first film I ever had on the air was on a Sunday, and there was some canoers in the Raccoon River. And I remember those shots. I'll never forget my very first TV news story on air. And
God, that's great. I mean, that you can remember that.
Yeah.
Okay, so I've got a 16mm wind-up Bell and Howell story, and you may know this story also, and if you do, you probably know it better than I, but it comes from a friend, Mike Lozano.
Yes, good old
Okay,
Mike.
he was working at a television station in Brownsville, is the way that I remember
Texas,
this.
right?
Yeah, before he came up here. Have you heard this story?
No, I have
okay.
not. Please
You'll
tell me.
love this. So it's on a podcast by George. So he's a Cub reporter down there, just a Cub reporter, and he steps out of a car under the curb in downtown Brownsville with his camera, and somebody walks up to somebody else right in front of him and shoots him dead on the sidewalk.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, and he's just wanting to get started. And I mean, he's like firsthand witness, almost involved in a murder in downtown Brownsville, and he's got the camera in his hands and shoots it. And I mean, he's got something that is going to take him right to the top in Brownsville and maybe get him into a major market. And he goes running back to the station to a room with a guy like you probably to get this on the air. And they pop open his camera, no film.
Oh no! Oh no! Oh no!
And he'd tell that story, and he could laugh about it, at that time. But yeah, I mean,
my God!
And what do you? And there was nothing in it.
Yeah. Oh.
He didn't have anything. So.
Oh, that's what a nightmare.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Oh,
so
my God.
let me ask you this. So we got to move the timeline along a little bit. You're starting off in the 16mm, 8mm film world, 16mm film world, working with Lyle Shires. Videotape comes along. A lot of Hollywood people will tell you that film is warmer, and that if you have
Sure.
the time and the wherewithal or whatever, you would always prefer to work with film as opposed to digital or tape. Is that true or not?
You know, I'm so glad that I was lucky enough to have the experience shooting film. There was a lot that could go wrong shooting film. I always say, I'm sorry, a monkey can shoot videotape. To shoot film, to make it come out, there were so many things that could go wrong. You had to thread the camera, and you had to use a light meter.
And those filters, right? You know.
Oh, yeah, you had to put little gelatin filters
Yeah.
in the film camera to get the correct color. And it was a wonderful process. But videotape came along. We started switching from film to videotape in the late, like 78, maybe 77. Then by 1980, we were completely into 3/4-inch videotape. It was much faster, and you didn't have to wait for the film to go through the developing process of the chemicals. And by 1980, pretty much everybody was done shooting. 80, 81, it was all 3/4-inch videotape and much more immediate. And the cameras actually got much heavier from the old film cameras, the CP16 on your shoulder. You had a videotape, a Sony BVU 100, which was probably a 30-pound videotape recorder, and a RCA TK76, which is another 30-pound camera, and then battery belts to power that, and another battery belt.
Yeah, I remember
for
the
the light.
belts. Made it look like Batman running around out there.
Yeah, well, I was so skinny back then that I couldn't wear them around my waist, so I had to wear them bandolero style. And
That's great.
It was, and those batteries for the camera would last like 20 minutes. So you would have like maybe 2 batteries just for your camera wrapped around you, and then another battery for your battery belt. I don't know how I did it. I was just like, oh boy. But then he was like, well, this is what you got to do, and this was my obsession, and luckily enough to make it a career.
Well, I don't want to put you on the spot, but hit some of the major news stories, the things when you look back that you were able to bring to the people.
I remember one of the big stories that I worked on back in my student days at WHO was the Pope's visit to Livingston Farms.
Yeah.
That was a big day, and I remember, I don't know how we did it, but I started the day by getting on a helicopter in a parking lot in downtown Des Moines, and flying up and getting aerials of the whole area, and then we landed, I don't even remember where we landed, close to Living History Farms, and then spent the day. It was very cold. It was a beautiful blue sky, but it was a very cold day. That was probably my first big story. But I mean, I've been lucky enough to shoot video and film of all presidents since Jimmy Carter. So that was my first campaign experience, was Jimmy Carter campaign in '76. And
it was small to start with. That was not a big deal.
Yeah.
I mean, he started at the campus of Drake University in '76, and I was there, and there were about a dozen people in the classroom. I mean, that was a slow build for that guy.
Well, that's why he made the Iowa caucuses, I believe,
Yeah,
what
yeah.
they were.
Put 'em on the map, yeah.
It sure did. And, you know, as much as I'm going through all those days of shooting and learning life lessons and making mistakes and learning how to deal with people and magnificent memories. Just drive around the state of Iowa, and I've been to in central Iowa, I've been to about every little small town there is, and I love
I gotta
doing
believe
that.
it. Tell us about the flood.
Well, the flood of '93, I remember living the corner of 5th and Grand in West Des Moines and seeing the mess that was happening, and they called me, and it was a Saturday, I think, and I ended up driving into Valley Junction and doing what you're not supposed to. I was like, well, this water looks pretty deep, but I'm gonna, with my little KCCI, I was working at KCCI by that time, and driving my KCCI Cavalier wagon through the water to get into Valley Junction. Probably not, do not drive through that kind of stuff. But that was, you couldn't get anywhere. I mean, it was quite the experience of trying just to get from one part of the city to the other.
Who did the aerials for that?
Honestly, I don't remember. I do remember getting into being the first pool camera where you share your footage with all the other stations into the water plant. L.D. McMullen?
Yeah,
Yes.
that's him. Yeah.
And he gave us a tour of maybe you were part. Were you part of that?
No, I was out by then.
Okay. We got on a boat, and they took us up by boat into the waterlogged. By now, they had surrounded it with sandbags, but into the waterlogged plant because we had lost our water. And I remember as soon as we stepped off the boat, the WHO radio correspondent was already interviewing him live on WHO radio and like telling so, well, this is what we're doing, da 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 da. Well, I had to put a mic on him for my needs, and we've joked about it since that he was live on WHO radio, and I just took my wireless microphone, and when you put a mic on somebody, you have to hide it and make it look nice. So I just untucked his shirt and put my hand up his shirt and attached the microphone while he's and his eyes got like this big, like what are you doing? Yeah. And I just mic'd him up and tucked his shirt back in, and we're now ready to go.
Well, that was great. Here's something stays with me from the flood of '93 coverage, and you can share this with your friends here at KCCI, and it's a shout out to Kevin Cooney. Now, when I was at WHO, when Captain Jack was on vacation, I would go up and do the air traffic reports.
Okay, very good.
I grew up in the city of Des Moines just like you did. I worked with my dad's trucking company. I knew the streets like the back of my hand. And so I kind of had a head start doing the traffic reports. On the ground, I was great. We got up in the plane, and if you're at 5,000 feet or 6,000 feet above the city and you're looking at the grid layout of the street, hell, they all look the same. I mean, the landmarks that you rely on at ground level to tell where everything's at, they're invisible from up there.
Yeah.
Okay, so those aerials that were on KCCI television, everybody was watching during the floods, watching the horror, really, out there. And Kevin Cooney is in the studio looking at the live feed of that coming in. And he was excellent. He was outstanding at that. And I still, to this day, don't know how he was able to do it. Maybe I'm just short a couple of marbles or whatever, but I was looking at the same thing that he was looking at, and I still couldn't tell what was what. But he was able to point out everything. And he would say, now you're looking at this, and now you're looking at that. And I'm telling you something, when you're looking at it downward from 6,000 feet, I was really impressed with that. It was great
he's
coverage.
Amazing. We've had some great adventures together, and that leads me up to the first time I've ever been to the White House was with Kevin to do an interview with President Clinton in the Roosevelt Room of the White House. The story, President Clinton was supposed to come to Ames to do a farm conference, and all three stations, WHO and WOI and KCCI, said to the White House, hey, can we interview the president when he comes to Iowa? They said, well, no. Why don't you come to the White House the week before, and we'll do it in the White House. It was the day of the Oklahoma City bombing.
Oh, my God.
And we...
At the Murrah Building,
Yeah, and so all the three stations, we all flew together, just happened to be on the same flight, and we got off the plane in our connection in St. Louis, and we hear that, there's been this horrible national terrorist tragedy. And we're like, well, our interview with the president is not going to happen because of all the events. And we still fly to Washington and get to the White House. Make a long story short, the president came out to the press room, read a statement about Oklahoma City, did not take questions, went back in. And an hour later, all three Des Moines stations with all three photographers, we had a round table in the Roosevelt Room of the White House. President Clinton came out and sat down and did the interview with the local stations. We flipped a coin. Kevin was the first one to ask him, what is your personal reaction? It's kind of like asking FDR, so what do you think about Pearl Harbor?
Yeah, and he was an emotional man.
Yeah.
Clinton was,
And it's like talking about the ultimate backstage pass to life. I mean, how did I get here? How did I get into the White House the day of such an amazing event? Well, and it was even, so our footage was used on CBS Evening News, was quoted by the AP, but the reason Clinton went ahead and did the interview with the Iowa stations, the Des Moines stations, was because we're Iowa. And it's an important political state, and that's why he still took the time in his day, on a day like that, to sit down for half an hour with all of us. So that was my first time to the White
Plus,
House.
you'd been promised, and you went there.
Yeah, but I
but
could
still,
they
they
could have easily
yeah,
said
they don't care about
no.
that. Yeah,
And Kevin and I came back to the White House 2 more times to do sit-downs with President Obama. And then the 4th time I went to the White House was with Steve Carlin. We also interviewed President Obama. Those were in the diplomatic reception room. So I was like, how did I get here? I mean, how is this kid shooting home movies with his little 8mm camera? All of a sudden now you're in the White House and you're, doing some pretty amazing things. So that's one of the top moments in my life.
well, and that's the reason that I wanted to do the podcast is because of this backstage pass that you've enjoyed all of these years, the things that you've seen, the things that you've witnessed, and the things that you've allowed us to see because of your camera.
Well, I always say that our job, local news, is to let people know what's going on in their neighborhood, good or bad. We're a conduit of information. We're out here, telling people, hopefully the important stories of what's going on in central Iowa and the nation and the world. But locally, we go out and find out what's happening. And for better or for worse, we run into some great human interest stories. We run into some tragedies. It's just all part of the mix. And I've been very lucky and blessed that I've been able to do that it'll be going on 44 years. It's
That's fantastic. Well, and there's been a lot of tragedy along the way. One of the first major stories that I was not a part of because I'd just gotten out of the business really was that United Airlines crash in Sioux City. Did you go up there?
No, I was not part of that one, but I was working. They sent just about everybody else, but that one I was not part of. Yeah.
Did you have to go out and shoot anything involving the Drake Diner?
I think the aftermath, and that's another horrible story. I've been to plenty of terrible news events where there's been death and family members. You have to be human. I mean, you have to, but at the same time, you still have to do your job. And I've shot stories where I've had tears in my eyes, but you have to keep on. I mean, you have to know when it's appropriate, when to shoot, and when to give people some level of privacy. But at the same time, we're there, covering a story, and it might not be. I always say we parachute into people's lives on sometimes the worst day of their life. And the bad element of that is I've got a demo reel of me being assaulted.
Oh, I didn't.
Out in the field of people.
How long ago?
Oh, this is over my course of my career.
Really? So more than once?
Oh, I've got a whole.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I've had a state trooper throw me on the hood of his car. I've had people try to knock the camera off my shoulder. I've had people come at me with a knife. I've had people throw rocks at me. I've had people kick me. You never turn the camera off.
Yeah.
You just have to keep on it for your own safety. The trooper, by the way, apologized, and we joked about it. Later, seeing him out in the field, but we are kind of a lightning rod when people, their emotions go get the best of them. I've had one guy come at me grab me by the throat and push me up against a brick wall. Keep on rolling. We filed charges against him. But I understand that people get upset. So that's kind of the bad part of being where things are happening.
That is bad. Here's what I used to tell folks. True, you wish that those things didn't happen, number one. Number two, you wish that you didn't have to cover them. But by covering them, by making people aware, by even making the horror apparent and felt, it might go a little way towards preventing something like that happening again to somebody else in a similar circumstance. I mean,
right.
There's always that. And like you say, there is some discretion involved in it. I remember one time I was standing with some reporters, guys. He was working third shift at Firestone, I think, and wood-burning furnace in his home. I caught the house on fire killed his whole family. I was there on the sidewalk when he pulled up.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, nobody's shooting pictures or taking any,
Yeah.
no microphones were on, nothing. He basically went into shock right in front of us. My God, but you cover the story, and if you didn't, maybe a wood burning stove gets somebody else.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there's ways to cover something without being sensational, and there's a fine line, a gray area about invading privacy. We've got quite a few people like, I don't want you to stop taking pictures. I mean, that's what that whole demo reel is. But it's like, okay, if I'm on public property, sorry, I can take pictures.
Yeah, don't touch me.
Yeah, well, that's it.
Yeah.
You'll hear a lot of that. That's the thing.
Or my equipment. I mean, that's the other part of it too.
Yeah.
I mean, that you're in charge of that stuff.
Yeah.
Get out of the way, will ya?
So you just get your little tripod packed up and go.
Telling you to get out of here! Turn that around! Move that camera, man. Move that camera, dog. Move that motherfucker. Go. Oh, hey!
I'm telling you, if you're taking pictures of this, I'll sue you, and I mean it.
Get out of here!
You don't have no right to get on this property.
Okay. Get off the property. You hear? Now get your butt off the job, and I mean now, unless you want to lose the camera and everything else.
These other stations were not allowed to film at all. They stayed over there. That's fine. I got half a mind to arrest you for interfering.
Don't touch me. Back off!
I don't want any fucking pictures taken.
Get that camera out of my face!
You're in Missouri right over there. Just back up.
Here just recently, did you get rolled out in the middle of the night for that horrific shooting of those police officers out on the west side?
Yeah, that's a horrible, horrible story. But
that was kind of scary.
Well, let's give credit to our local police departments. They're so professional, and being in the middle of all that and just seeing them do their job so professionally, and they go into just police mode, but at the same time very respectful of us, knowing that we have to tell the story as well. And we have great relations with the police departments here in town, and I can't say enough of all of them, especially the Des Moines Chief Dana Wingert and all of their crew. We've been through a lot, and we still live here just like everybody else, and just our job is to make sure that people know what's going on.
Well, good on you, and you've seen a lot of that and brought a lot of that into our living rooms, and I think there is a little bit of a silver lining in some of those dark clouds. But you're also you do some nice stuff too. You do some nature stuff, and
that's my favorite thing.
Yeah.
When I was a kid with my home movie camera, I remember shooting nature stuff. I love nature stuff, so it's kind of like when it's a slow news day, I'll say, hey, can I go outside and play in the rain? And I just love doing nature stories and finding little. My thing is, if I can, sometimes I'll literally, if I'm doing like a spring piece or a fall piece or whatever it would be, sometimes I'll literally get on my knees and put my glasses on and just look. Oh, if you could do this in anybody's backyard, just like get down and look and like, oh my God, look, there's a spider web, and it's got dewdrops on it. And sometimes you just have to take the time to notice things like that, and then you just take your cameras like, aha. But if you just like walk through a backyard, you won't notice those things. But anybody can do it if they just take the time. And,
yeah, well, you need to do it. That keeps you sane.
Well,
that's the other end of the spectrum.
Yeah, and I've got. I'm very proud to say I've done several of these, and the sound is just as important as being from radio, as the pictures. And I'll put the microphone so close that the birds come through really clear. And we've had many, many people send us pictures and videos of their mainly cats watching the TV. I've got one of the like 4 cats watching my nature videos.
I love cat videos.
Yes, and they're like pawing at the screen trying to get, or looking behind the TV because the sound. And I always said we should have done it. We should do a promo that we're #1 with cats and dogs in the metro. And we've got this great video of these cats just watching my nature videos, and that's a big compliment that I can entertain our pet
that's
population. Yeah.
Well, you know, the career's so long and you've done so much and you've seen so much and you've allowed us to see so much. The irony in these terminologies, I mean, you've got vision, we see things. I mean, it all has to do with the lens of the camera, folks. So I wanted to tell this one story. The last time that I saw Courtney on a professional level, this is an interesting little vignette, actually. I was out at the Des Moines International Airport. This was when I was doing my marketing thing, carrying a briefcase around the country and buying dinners and sitting in airports, basically. But anyway, we're on a plane at takeoff, and we're still in the ascent, not right after takeoff, wheels up, and the pilot comes on the intercom, and But before the pilot came on the intercom, somebody in the passenger compartment said smoke.
Oh, no.
And we look around, and there's smoke. Oh, we're taking off.
Oh, no.
Yeah, and there's smoke in the passenger compartment. And so the stewardesses come along and tell everybody to buckle up and all that kind of stuff. I got on the credit card operated telephone and called my wife to tell her that there was smoke on the plane, and we're turning around. So, and then we come back and they make the emergency landing, and we fly over the fire trucks and all that stuff.
That's
and,
a great
and make this an emergency landing. So when I get off of the plane, and here's the intrepid Courtney Kintzer there with his camera crew, and they're going to shoot interviews with people that are getting off of this plane. And Courtney wanted me to talk, and I said, I'm retired. Go get one of these other people, because there were plenty of people to talk, and I just didn't want to do it. So you got a lot of stuff there. But here's the thing that's interesting about that, and it's interesting given what's going on right now. I read an account in the Register about that event, and they interviewed some passengers, and the passengers, a couple of them said, well, you know, we didn't take it serious. We were cracking jokes and laughing. Okay, that's what they said. Now, I was in the front row because I was flying a lot, and I was in the front row of the plane. And so when this thing was turning around and coming back to the airport and there was smoke in the cabin and all that stuff, I turned around and looked at every face in every seat of that airplane. There wasn't anybody not only not laughing or telling jokes, they weren't even smiling. It was white knuckle time. Wow. Everybody was scared to death.
I can imagine.
But for whatever reason, they wanted to tell reporters that they took it as a joke, that they were laughing, that nobody was seriously concerned or worried, and maybe it's just because they wanted to appear brave or whatever. Well, okay, is that fake news? Because I'm telling you, that ain't what happened. It kind of was fake news, but it certainly wasn't the fault of the Register reporter or of Courtney. It was the fault of the people that they interviewed, and there was no way that you guys would have known any differently.
You kind of get in a situation where you kind of have to, well, I wasn't there, but that's what they're telling us.
Right. And it was not that way. So
wow,
there's your little fake news.
That's crazy.
And a lot of people would look at that and blame that on the news media and say, well, okay, I was there and it wasn't like that at all. Well, okay, well, you got to go by what people tell you. So,
right, yeah.
So there you go. Well, anyway, like I said, there's so many things to talk about, and we've already shot our time here. So maybe we'll circle back and come back to this again.
Oh, yeah.
But, you know, we talked about these mentors, and we talked about the venerable Lyle Shires.
Yes.
God love him.
Go Lyle.
Now, for me, Bob Wilbanks.
Yes, he was the first news director that I ever had. So Lyle hired me, but Bob Wilbanks was the news director back in '75.
Soul of the earth, love the man. My God,
yes.
he would have been the mentor for me.
Yeah,
Bob was
he was
great
like
guy.
involved with like Gundog magazine.
Yes,
and
I
like
worked
that.
for him there.
Oh, that's
our
fantastic.
careers kind of followed. I spent a lot of time, a lot of years with Bob, and he mentored me on the business of journalism and news and all that. But more than anything else, just how to live, just how to be a man.
Good.
Just how to do it right.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of guy that Bob was, and also just a kind a man that you could learn from if you wanted to.
Sure.
And Lyle the same way.
Oh, Lyle is the best. I stopped by over the holidays and visited with Lyle and his wife Julia, and we talked old times, and he brought up a box of his books, his cinematography books from teaching at Drake.
Yeah.
And what he had I remember he had these on his desk at Channel 13 that I used to just gaze over, and he said, take anything that you want here. And I've been honored that he's let me take some of his books. But mentoring, I don't know if we've gotten into the point of mentoring, how important it is mentoring other photographers. And it started with Lyle mentoring me, and I've been lucky enough to mentor a lot of photographers. Two of them Jeff Christian and Jake Carpenter. They started with me separate times, but as 15-year-old high school students, and shadowing me, and then getting internships, and then when they were able to drive, get part-time positions.
Sounds like a young Courtney Kinzer.
Well,
almost.
yeah, it's crazy. But Jake Carpenter now is a photojournalist for CNN Chicago.
Yeah.
And Jeff Christian shoots for freelances for NBC News New York.
Wow.
And I'll
Big
be
leagues, folks.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I always borrow this expression: a teacher is only a success when the student surpasses the teacher. And I'm honored to say that I can see these guys and other people that I've mentored, but I'll be on a story and like, how would Jeff Christian shoot this story? I swear that's true. And I think he's in Germany right now shooting an assignment.
Wow.
Yeah, it's like, wow, to be able to find some people that have the vision and the hunger, and teach them the little that I know and watch them blossom. And
Well, you're very humble. They've got the vision and the skill, but they don't have the experience. And this guy, like Georgie Makinich, the bulldozer operator that I told you about, there is nobody better at this
coming full circle
than the guy that we got right here, Courtney Kinzer. He's a get. We'll circle back with him. I want to do this again and get caught up and have some more of these stories shared, because they deserve to be shared. And it's kind of ironic or funny that we're doing it on an audio-only podcast, but
that's okay.
Yeah, we can
Sound
paint word pictures. Yeah, it is. Sound is important. So I really appreciate it, and thanks once
George,
again.
It's been a pleasure and an honor.
That's great. And that's another podcast by George.